It's Joe, your faithful host and co-founder of Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. In case you missed our birthday, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary this summer. For 10 years, we've been getting together each and every week to bring you epic tales of tech support and business management, and I'm pretty sure we've saved a lot of people a ton of time by sharing our struggles and solutions. Starting now, we're shifting our focus to the Patreon community. That means the newest shows will be posted primarily on Patreon. How do you get the latest episodes? Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click on support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the weekly patron-only episodes right in your favorite podcast app. If you already support us on Patreon, log in there to get your special link and subscribe to the patron-only show so you don't miss anything. Here on the public show, we'll be featuring classic episodes hand-selected for you from our catalog of over 500 episodes, along with occasional new episodes too. And remember, we're regularly releasing new content on Patreon, where you can join our community of supporters starting at just $15 per month, giving you access to the freshest content. We feature dozens of exclusive shows on Patreon where we speak a little more freely about how we make business decisions, navigate client relationships, manage our employees, and sometimes deal with mistakes and difficulties too. Plus, as a patron, you receive access to our entire back catalog where you can revisit classic episodes and learn from colleagues we've interviewed who've shared their own best practices. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to pledge monthly on Patreon. We'd really appreciate your support, and we're confident your business will benefit from the wisdom of the community we've gathered there. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy this episode of Command Control Power.
Today's Command Control Power is sponsored by Watchman Monitoring. Cape and tights, not included.
We are very pleased this week to be joined by one of our French listeners, Guillaume Gète of Gète.net Consulting in near Paris, France, right, Guillaume?
Exactly. Hello.
Welcome. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for, inviting me first.
So you reached out to us, I guess, thanks to the Slack that everyone knows and loves by now, the Mac admin Slack to be exact. And you introduced yourself as, among other things, the maker of DiskMaker X, the DiskMaker 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Soon to be known as you put it, Mac OS DiskMaker, I think. Would that be the new name?
I don't know. I may have, I've got some issues because some Chinese guys say, hey, we want to use the DiskMaker 10 name and maybe register it and blah, 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 blah. So I may have to change the name, but whatever. Not a big deal.
Interesting. Now, wait, they want to use that name. Will they buy that name from you, or no, they just want to...
No, they just get the Chinese name and they say they want the keyword, internet keyword, but whatever. I mean, no, not a big deal.
Interesting.
I would be a bit suspicious of emails like that or contact like that.
Yeah. I am a bit as well, but anyway, we don't know.
I like hearing Jerry. Sounds like Jerry's coming in off the traffic copter. Jerry, what's the traffic like on 95 out there?
I have a feeling you can tell us exactly what it's like out there on 95, Jerry.
We're all remote today. France,
exactly.
On the highways of Connecticut, in the classroom.
Don't talk to me about highways tonight, please.
Yeah, that's right. You had a little bit of trouble. Like, do you want to bring that up on the show and vent a little bit?
Just that I was coming back from some intervention for a customer in about 60 miles from Paris today. And so when I went back, I got a flat tire. And so I just waited on the highway for almost 2 hours. I was not sure to make it tonight, but hopefully could get a mechanic to bring me to repair my tire, and then I could come back. Woo.
And we're very happy you made it just in the nick of time, and we're very glad to have you tonight because we have a lot of stuff to talk about.
Sure.
I think it would be a good place to start with just sort of your background, how you got into consulting, how you got such a cool domain name. Kind of go from there.
Well, it's a long story. Are you ready? But it's an interesting one. So basically, I met my first Mac really in 1994, so 20 years, more than 20 years ago now, at university. And I was really, really getting into the Mac at this time. And I was reading Mac magazines even before I got a Mac, which was something quite interesting. And I got my first Mac in 1996. It was, this great Performance 62100, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had the Performa 600, I think was my first Mac.
I think on every Mac.com or any another website, they said it was one of the worst Macs ever created, But I love this machine. I mean, it got everything you could like from a Mac, and it's got great CDs at the time. And also, I really got into ClarisWorks at this time. I really loved ClarisWorks. It was such a great product.
That was a great app.
I still cry every night, because Apple decided to shut it down. But anyway,
I think you can can't you still use Apple? What is it called? AppleWorks, right? I think that's probably still get that running on a not too old machine.
Yeah, but AppleWorks was really the nail in the coffin of ClarisWorks, ClarisWorks was a great app when it was still Claris, but when Apple got it and made it AppleWorks, it's not the same thing. Really not. It has the worst presentation module ever. Anyway.
Did ClarisWorks have any built-in cloud support, cloud syncing, or anything like that?
Oh,
no.
But it was
cloud support.
At the time, it was supposed to be the flagship app for OpenDoc.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, OpenDoc. That was where you could integrate different components within different apps and things, right?
Yeah. And it was very hot at the time. It was also so buggy that almost nobody, I think, Apple used it a bit for Apple Share IP products as well at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, in fact, but anyway. And so I was in a Mac in 1996, and I went in London in 1997 for my studies, because I was studying English. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't sound like it, but anyway. And in 1997, it was just right when Steve Jobs came back to Apple.
Yeah.
And the fact is that I was at the right place at the right time, because all the Apple Care support centers in Europe were centralized in London at this time. And we were looking and I was searching for a job. I just arrived in London. And I was looking for a job. And in a newspaper, I searched for IT jobs. And they were looking for a technical Mac support guy. Haha! Speaking French! Ho ho! You say, okay. Seems quite good for me. So I tried it, and so that's when I entered in Apple Care, which was not managed by Apple at this time, but another Fujitsu company. It was called ICL Service. And so I never wore the Apple badge, in fact. But it was really a nice time, and I was really getting into support, technical support, and I really enjoyed it. And in 1919, I came back to France, and I worked for an Apple training center. Then I worked for an advertising company, and it was a nightmare. And I think we were something like 3 guys to deal with 500 machines.
I was going to say, what was the biggest sort of nightmarish aspect about it? But was it just an overwhelming amount of machines to support back then? Yeah. Yeah,
and it was just at the time a transition from macOS 10 from macOS 9 to macOS 10, and the job was not bad, but the means, the money there was not there at all, and the technical support, I got almost no money, and sometimes got just impossible to deal with. So then I decided that. At the same time, it was a bit before. In 1998, so when I was in London, I launched a website to talk about the Mac, and it was called Gète.net. Yeah, because I'm quite a centristic guy,
I think you're the first. I was going to say you were the first one to beat my 6-letter domain, but actually, now that I think about it, Luis, what is it? Ook.co. I think that's the. I don't think anybody can beat that, right? 3-letter top-level domain, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, so I take care about this one. I got Gète.net and Gète.fr as well, which is even shorter. So
very nice,
but French, so not so good. So I published on this website. I just published lots of technical articles and quite funny articles. I was trying to put a lot of humor in my technical stuff, and it worked a lot because French magazines began to talk about it, and French websites as well. So it became quite popular. And I also, what did I do at this time? Oh, too many things. I began to work also with French Mac magazines at the same time. So I was quite busy. And I decided to work for myself, in fact, and to become a consultant in 2006, 10 years ago.
So it's pretty safe to say you've been doing this for quite a while at this point.
Oh, half of my life, yeah.
Wow. Well done. Well done. Well done. So what made you decide to work for yourself just 10 years ago to get started with your own consulting?
At this time, I was working as a contractor for a company. So I was working in a small company, which was about 10 people. And we were dealing with advertising companies, essentially. And I was getting really mad that all the bad stuff came to me. And I never got the money from the bad stuff I managed to deal with, And I think the worst thing was when my boss at this time was saying, yeah, you can't pay too much for you because, it's difficult. While he was driving his Audi car, and with DVDs encrusted in the back seat.
Wow.
I got this picture, and I said, okay, so I'm dealing with stupid people most of the time. My boss was quite, I would not say stupid, but it was a bit difficult to deal with. And so I said, okay, now I'm quite known on the French market, I would say. And I talked about a French guy from Apple, which alas was deceased a few years ago. But he was a really very well-known guy in France. And I asked him, well, do you think I could do it by myself? Do you think I could be a self-consultant and things like this? And he told me, well, if you can't do it, I think nobody can do it. So I said, okay, so if you think I can do it, I should be able to do it. So I built my company and I published some PR to announce, well, I was beginning to work for myself. And I think I got my first customer about 5 minutes later. So
wow. That's a great, two great votes of confidence there. So did your customers know you, as a known author, in Mac magazines in France at the time?
Yeah, but that's it. In fact, the thing is that I was really well known. My name is quite well known in France, I think. And all the PR I've done, in fact, was all the work I've done also freely most of the time on my website or in magazines or stuff like this. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a technical background and people know about it and they see that your name is coming quite often and people know you, and if you go to the Apple Store, people know you as well, it's quite useful.
So how has your your brand and your consulting practice grown over the last 10 years? Has it transformed in any way, or have you kept it close to the vest as a one-man show?
Difficult to say, but I think that there was a turning point, I think, a few years ago, because, in fact, let's go back. In 2006, when I began to work on consulting, I really thought that I would have a lot of work from quite big companies, which need a guy for a few weeks to manage migrations or stuff like this, or Active Directory integration. But the fact is that biggest number of companies is small companies. In fact, you've got SMBs just about 90% of the market. Mm-hmm. And so the fact is that most companies coming to me were like something like 10 people companies, mm-hmm. with a manager, with a director who was dealing with the technical stuff most of the time because he liked the Mac and he wanted to go on this and he wanted to install Macs. But at the time, it was becoming too difficult for him to manage everything. And so they say, okay, now we need some technical guy to deal with our stuff. And I think it's something which 50% at least of my customers are in this configuration, So when I decided to work by myself, the thing were not what I really thought they would be. Oops, I will do it again. Mm-hmm. When I began my business plan, I really thought that I would get a lot of big companies, but in fact not. There were really small companies, and I'm okay with that.
So most of these big companies have internal IT staff that handles most of that work.
Yeah, that's it. And so,
and that's typically the case here in the United States too. Is we're very, very close to New York City, Joe, myself, and Sam, and that's what we do see as well. This small teams, businesses. I know that Sam does work with a little bit larger enterprise mm-hmm. groups, but for the most part, that's typically what we see is small to medium-sized companies like yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And that does make it a little bit easier to manage, manage as a smaller operation. You don't need as big, large of an infrastructure as you might to deal with, 200 to 500 person companies. You need a kind of a staff to be able to do that.
But it also depends on the companies, because 3 years ago, I got a contract with a small company, which is about 10 people, I think, 10, 12 people. But they are a kind of hedge fund which deal with 100 million euros hedge fund, something like this. Mm-hmm. So it's a big one, and they're investing a lot in companies, and they needed a lot of reactivity and a lot of support, and they were okay to pay it. It's okay, not a big deal. They were really ready to pay for it. But the thing is that their requests were really sometimes overwhelming, and so I decided this year that we decided, in fact, together that we should stop to work together for the technical support directly. I will work with them for more like some supervisor, IT supervisor, IT consult, I would say, just for IT consulting, but not support. And I just gave them to another company, which deal to help them. And in fact, it helped me a lot. Because when you have to deal with technical support with the same people every day, sometimes it's just exhausting. And at the end of the day, we say, okay, things were great for 3 years. We got the migration to the Mac, which went quite well. And but we have to work differently now, and it's okay.
Wow. So when did that occur to you? What was the turning point? Was there a specific, incident or instance that you can think of that comes immediately to mind when you knew that was something you had to move away from?
I think there are different turning points. I was listening a bit of the old Control Command Power podcasts these days, and I found one which was about firing customers. It's
I think I need to listen to that one again.
Yeah, it's a great one, but. A few years ago, I think it's 1 year or 2 years ago, somebody tweeted about a presentation from a guy from New York, which is called Mike Montero, which is a designer. And you may have heard about this presentation, which is called "You Pay Me."
Yes.
Something like that.
I've watched that video. Yes.
Yeah.
And
there we go. Now we have the explicit rating.
And it's so great. I mean, it's if you haven't seen it, watch it. I mean, stop this podcast and watch it. It's really wonderful. You go on the Vimeo and you can watch it, and it's really, really great.
No, don't stop our podcast. Put it on after our podcast.
Yes. What are you saying here?
It does get in your head, though, doesn't it? I find it like really inspirational when I'm facing one of those moments with a client. His voice is in my head. It's like, F you, pay me, just like, that's it. It's a great,
and the thing is that it's also very interesting because it's also a bit for designers, of course, but it was talking about the importance of the fact about contracts. Mm-hmm. How you redact your contract, that you have to need to help from some lawyer maybe. So that's what I did last year. I said, okay, my contracts are not so good, so maybe I have to rewrite them and be sure that everything is okay at this point. So it was quite important for me. And also he was saying, well, sometimes you have to remember that a customer can fire you, but you can fire the customer as well, which is quite exhilarating as well. I had the occasion to do it twice, and it was quite interesting. Yeah.
So it was a series of incidents that or just an ongoing like level of support, the burden of support that led you that way.
Yeah, sure. And also the fact that I'm getting older, so you don't have the same energy at 40 years old when you got about 10 years ago. And it was a good time, I think, to put things in perspective and to think about working differently. One of the most important fact was that I went to London this year for MacAD the Mac conference by AMSIS. And it was really, really interesting. There were lots of Mac consultants and a lot of Mac administrators, and the conferences were really great. And there were a lot of very interesting speeches. And also the fact that I got my best friend is working for Jamf right now. And he told me about all this stuff, which is really, really interesting, like watchman monitoring. Have you heard about this?
Drink.
Tell me more.
It sounds great, I think. You should try it. So watchman monitoring, I decided to really have a look at it, and it's really great. Yeah, it was a really turning point as well. And I decided to try to push managed services as well. So, and it's really, right now I got two nice contracts with new customers, but I got from what I stole from another company, which is the same company for 2 customers, interestingly. And I just got the customer because I showed them what you can do now to manage your machines really better. I think the turning point, that's it. That's going to conferences is important, to watch how other people work, And going to Slack was important, really. I can't say it enough, but yeah, it's really interesting. And going to managed services and to try something different, to also to be able to be more proactive about support.
Absolutely, and it's such a unique time that we're experiencing, and it sounds cliche, but it's really not. All of a sudden, these tools are available to us at an affordable price, and all this information, this hive mind that gets shared on Slack every single day, and we just never had these tools just a few years ago, where you could go and get so many things that can propel your business forward.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, the community is getting stronger. The Apple consulting community has definitely found some different avenues and outlets and things and different places where they converge and where we talk shop amongst ourselves. And you're right, Jerry, it's a new thing. I mean, back a while, 10 years ago or so, there were just a few places I could think of. I mean, it was really like at conferences. You'd have to go to the conference and then maybe the mailing list, but that was about it. We were also maybe involved in some of the other communities out there, but really kind of, secondary. But there are definitely places, like you mentioned, of course, Slack, where we come together and congregate. And I think the community is better for it because these tools grow out of these shared needs and this group kind of hive mind about how we can better serve our customers and serve ourselves better as well. Because again, my mind returns to that "F you, pay me" refrain, and it just gives you strength. When you're dealing with a client that seems to be a little bit of a bully or somebody or whatever, and you can almost feel the strength of the community behind you. You can feel your colleagues in your head saying, walk away from this one.
And there is this great sentence in Dr. Who when he says, "You are not alone."
Right. That's right.
Exactly this. Yeah, I was listening to one of the recent podcasts, and I think it was about your story about this customer who decided to try to repair the red server or whatever by himself. I was like, oh my God, it's my life.
That's right. Yeah.
I lived this so many times.
Just a follow up on that client story. Something I had forgotten to share at the end of that conversation. This was the client where they called us and said, the server's down. We see red lights. We've tried everything. It was like, one of us said, like, you shouldn't have tried anything. I'll be right there, kind of thing. And so we, at the end of that visit, which was like, I felt like I had been through war. Trying to get the server back up and everything, and kind of telling them how all the efforts. And at the end, I said, I'm hoping it rebuilds successfully overnight. If I'll be able to monitor it, I'm hoping I'm able to stay connected remotely. And if I can't, I'll be here in the morning. They said, can you be here first thing? And I said, yeah, I'll be here. I'll make sure I'm responsible for it. And they said, okay, well, we hope we don't see you in the morning. And I kind of waited for like half a beat, and I said, the feeling is mutual.
Oh, did you really? That's awesome.
With a smirk on my face, and I walked out. I thought I could let that land. Let them take that how they want. But I forgot to share that the first time around. I thought afterwards, I was like, that was one of those things that could have been a missed opportunity. And I was just glad to get that in there because that's exactly how I felt at the time.
Yeah. But it reminded me of a story about a customer a few months ago. I think it was 1 year ago. Which had a promise. I think it was a small Thunderbolt bay. They called me and said, "Oh, we've got one drive which displays a red dot." I said, not good. Okay, I check it. Indeed, yeah, I've got to do something. So we ordered a new drive, and I said, "But it's okay, don't worry." And they called me 10 minutes later saying, "Nothing is working, and now I've got 2 red lights on the drives."
Yikes.
That's a bad day.
That was the same way that RAID 6 was invented, I think. Same exact story. I
but this one was only RAID 5, so...
Oh no.
And that's, of course, was this day that we noticed that the backups were not working properly, of course. And so I had to bring the bay to a guy which I know, which is a specialist of data recovery. And funnily, in fact, he told me, well, it's interesting because one of the drives have a few blocks which are dead, yeah, but the other drive is just perfect. smells fishy. And so I tried to get in touch with Promise, and the problem is that Promise, we got mail support, which is very long when you're in France, because when you send a mail, it's in Taiwan, I guess, so we get the mail 1 day later, and when you answer, you get the mail, the answer 1 day later as well, so it can be a bit long. And they send me a command and say, okay, so use this command, and it should be force the drive to go back, and magic, yeah, it's back.
Wow.
It's back.
Yeah. I've had that happen one time before with Promise as well, where the drive, like you said, the drive will, for whatever reason, be marked as offline, taken offline by the RAID unit, by the RAID controller, but, it hasn't actually failed mechanically. And you can, like you said, force it, force online or something like that. The thing, the pattern with Promise, just to vent about them again, first of all, their phone support, at least from the US, has been pretty darn good. I mean, I have had that guidance on the phone and stuff, and it's come in handy in a couple of those cases. But the hardware itself, I mean, it just the RAID just goes offline. It can't handle it, even a single drive failure. If you have a RAID 6 unit, one drive fails. I mean, that's what it's designed to do, is keep going, and it just doesn't. It locks up the Thunderbolt bus typically, and the machine is just hung. You've got to hard reboot the machine. You've got to power cycle the RAID just to remount it, and then you're good to go until you get a drive to put in there. It can be very frustrating to deal with. I will say though that the other follow up to that RAID incident was that after update, we had all these ongoing issues after replacing the just one drive and rebuilding, and then the second drive and rebuilding. Throughout that whole process, it was very unreliable, and just really we couldn't actually access it while it was rebuilding consistently. But upgrading the firmware on the RAIDs made all the difference in the world, which was something I didn't want to do in the midst of drive failures. I thought, let's not introduce a new variable here by changing the firmware version. I would have liked to have done that ahead of time, proactively. And this again was a client that didn't engage us in any kind of ongoing support or maintenance. But that's a tip too. Just keep those Promise units up to date, because this was a case where they actually were also not able to access it during the rebuild. So that was a really bad situation. But it all worked out, luckily.
Did you update the firmware during the rebuild, you said?
Well, so what I did, because in my experience, like I said, I'll power cycle the unit, reboot the machine, and then replace a drive. That will allow me to access the RAID. I'll replace the drive and let it rebuild, and throughout that whole time, it should be accessible and no problem, and barely, you barely even notice a slower performance. In this case, though, the machine kept being inaccessible. It would hang the whole machine, the whole Mac Mini server. And so we basically turned off file sharing and just allowed the RAID to rebuild. So we didn't access it during that whole time. It did. The first drive successfully rebuilt overnight, but the machine was hung. So I had to actually physically go back on site. I did have to, see them in the morning. Hey guys, here I am. Had to hard reboot the machine again. I think, or maybe I just unplugged the RAID. But in any case, before I did the second one, I waited until the end of the day, first of all, and then we updated the firmware before doing it. And on the second drive rebuilding, it was not problematic at all. So I figured once I had at least some level of redundancy, I was confident in updating the firmware, and then that did make all the difference.
Nice.
Well, once I tried to update the firmware on, I think it was on an X of Red, which was rebuilding. It was the worst idea ever. I can tell you.
Wow.
Don't do it.
So you are endorsing, Joe, upgrading the firmware in failing conditions.
Well, I mean, within reason.
We're all pressing him now.
Well, like at the time, so I'm having no luck with this server. It continues to be, difficult. I left one part out, which is that I went there in the morning to power cycle and get it all back up and running. Got it all back online. Even after the first drive had rebuilt, before starting the second drive rebuilding, the server, I got back to my office, and it was an hour later, they said that the server's down again. So this time I remoting in. I'm able to get into the machine, and the RAID, I couldn't get into the machine, and I had her describe what it looked like, and there was one of those fast blinking lights on the drive that had just rebuilt. You get an orange light that blinks rapidly, and the rest of the unit won't respond. That's all you're getting on the machine. None of the other drives are showing access or anything like that. So I had her forcibly power down that unit, and I'm just like crossing my fingers remotely here. Then what did I do? Then I upgraded the firmware on the backup RAID just to like have that, just to make sure that would all, kind of go well. Once that went well, I had to re-plug in the RAID, the main RAID that had the now just one failing drive. It was inaccessible, and then I upgraded the firmware on that one, thinking maybe it is this outdated firmware. And again, crossing fingers, and sure enough, it successfully updated, and it was 100% stable ever since then. The rest of the day, it worked great. That night, I rebuilt I initiated the rebuild on drive number 6, which was the other failed drive. And this time I was able to stay connected remotely. The unit did not, hang or crash the machine or anything like that. So it was a very cautious thing. And when I said, okay, I'm going to upgrade the firmware because it's out of date since you guys never call us for any, since you never allow us to do any kind of support and maintenance, the user who had already tried everything said to me, do you think that's a good idea to introduce a new variable? And I'm like, that's actually a great question to ask right now. But the only reason I'm doing this is because it's clearly not performing very well as it is. And I said, in my experience, these things typically, do tend to be accessible and performant, even with a RAID, one drive that's offline. So I'm operating on the assumption that since this firmware is out of date, this is the difference in your setup versus all these other ones I maintain. And sure enough, it did work out. But I thought that was funny being challenged in the midst of it. Like, do you think that's a good idea to upgrade the firmware? I'm like, why don't you leave the technology consulting up to me? That was my real answer,
Yeah, but worse people, yeah.
Yeah, just to dovetail off of this conversation, Joe, this is something that you and I discovered in chat and was probably very obvious. And not to beat this promise dead horse to the ground, but we both made the observation that you can't update the firmware without physically being there on site, because you cannot reboot the promise remotely. It requires you to actually shut it down, and that's pressing the button. Yeah, so that's a bit frustrating to support that machine remotely. It's almost impossible.
Well, the scary part too is in their software. First of all, they make you type confirm. And that's always like, whoa, okay, let me read this again, and that's exactly why they do it. And the message is like, please, like, you are initiating a firmware thing, like, don't power down the machine, don't make sure it doesn't go to sleep, yada, yada, yada. Okay, I get that. I'm glad they warn users. It's a little scary to type confirm because it makes you think, like, is there a potential for data loss under normal circumstances? Well, anyway, I just have to go ahead with it. So you do that and it updates. And then at the end, you get this message from the software that says, the RAID will restart. It says something like that. And it says something like, if you're updating the firmware, if you have an original Pegasus connected and a Pegasus 2, like there's some kind of situation there where you have to hold the button down on the unit itself. So they do tell you about that. But in my experience, we did not have that. We had 2 Pegasus 2s. There wasn't an original Pegasus. And it was the same thing you just described, Jerry, where you have to reboot the hardware. It says it's going to restart, like you click restart, and it doesn't come back up. You have to like hold the button down and then wait, and then power it back up. So yeah, it's not consistent with what they say will happen, which is also like gulp. I hope this is working and not going to just crash right now. I'd love to take a minute to thank our sponsor this week, Watchman Monitoring.
So Watchman Monitoring is a monitoring tool that you can not only install on your computer, but on all your client computers. So once you sign up, any client that you add to your Watchman account shows up in your control panel. Watchman will monitor server software, so it'll take a look at things like Daylight, Careo server, Lightspeed server. It'll make sure that those servers are working properly and backing up. It'll make sure that your Time Machine backups are working properly. It integrates seamlessly with products like Backblaze, CrashPlan, Carbon Copy Cloner. It will monitor I/O errors on disk drives. It'll take a look at RAID systems. It monitors network system performance, detects malware, and also can give you great reports on clients that you have on your network. So if your client is looking for inventory on all his machines and they want serial numbers and specs, Watchman can deliver that to you as well. It's invaluable, and we don't know how we run our businesses without it.
Watchman Monitoring is your main interface, with your clients for your managed services practice. It's a real cornerstone. It's true. It's a big aspect of that. And for a lot of people, I think it should be the first piece as you're building out your managed services offering. You almost can't do it without Watchman Monitoring. Before Watchman, I just remember having to corral all these disparate email alerts from all this various software. Carbon Copy Cloner is telling me that a backup failed, and Cario is telling me that a license expired, and you just have to like figure out how to manage all that stuff. With Watchman, you just have one portal. You have one place where you can go in and you can say, I don't want to know about this again for 30 days. Don't bother me again for a little while in this issue. Or you can go through and you can just get a list of all of these little issues, either by client or by machine or whatever the case may be. So it's just such a great way to have a centralized dashboard where you can see just what's going on with all of your monitored systems. It's just a fantastic piece of software. Highly recommended. WatchmanMonitoring.com/command control power. Thanks again to Watchman Monitoring for sponsoring Command Control Power.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because you mentioned that you've got technical phone support with Promise, and it allows me to touch about one of the issues you got when you're not English talking people, you know, is that sometimes the support is not available for your language, or is just localized or available only for one country, especially the US, and not always the rest of the world, or is much more difficult to get support for the rest of the world. And for Promise, it was, I think it was really only by mail, or maybe you got phone call, but only if you got paid for the technical support. So you have to pay for it, which all the customers don't always want to do. And the thing is that also in France, sometimes we've got an issue is that we've got localization of products, which is another kind of problem we can get, because sometimes in localization, we've got more bugs added to the software, which is fun. So we've got our own kind of French specific bugs, you know, because sometimes localization people in Apple or Microsoft or wherever, they just don't know what they have to translate. Just for a fun story, I was on a photocopier today. I think it was a Konica one. I just saw today that among all the kind of connection you can do, like LDAP or Novel Netware or whatever on the copier, you also have an option to connect to Répertoire Actif, which is the French translation, direct translation for the Active Directory.
Nice.
And Apple did this one a few years ago in macOS 10. And it's a small one. It's a funny one, but sometimes it can be very interesting because we got some very specific bugs sometimes because of translation, which is a nightmare to make fix.
Yeah, it's a whole other variable to be Googling for and stuff like that. I mean, you may be having an issue that's totally unique to your software because of the localization. That's interesting.
That must be terribly frustrating.
We got it was at the time of macOS 9 or 8, I think 8.5. We got a very specific bug in the French version because of there was a Unicode extension in OS 10, macOS, which was installed, and sometimes on the French version of the OS, it began to freak out. We don't know why. And your Mac crashed. You reboot. You got an error message, a weird error message, and then when you reboot, you got two files in the trash can, but you could not ever remove.
Wow.
The only software this time which was able to remove it then was Disk Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Already, it was in 1999.
Wow.
I think. They were good at this time, you know. They are still good anyway. And or you had to reformat the machine and reinstall your OS. And maybe a few days later, bing, it could restart as well.
Wow.
And talking about the OS 9 days, holy cow. I mean, remember rebuilding the desktop in OS 9?
There were the good times, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You know, we had the senior software engineer from Alsoft who makes Disk Warrior on our show last year or the year before last. It's just amazing that Disk Warrior has lasted through all these iterations of Mac OS.
You know, I think I've known the time where it was Norton utilities were good. It was such a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah, my God.
Guillaume, you know, it sounds like you were extremely busy running your Apple consulting company. So when did you find the time and come up with the idea to come out with DiskMaker?
That's a good question. That's Apple's fault. Because in 2012, I think, or 2011, Apple sent a PR message saying, macOS 10 Lion is available, and now you don't need a DVD to install it anymore. You need to download the app from the App Store, and it will reinstall by itself like magic on your hard drive. Yeah, interesting. And so I tried to analyze a bit like how we could do this. And So the answer was quite easy to find. Yeah, I've got an install esd.dmg file that you can just put in disk utility, and then you put USB drive and you restore on it, and you've got a working OS X installation disk. So that's it. For technical people, yeah, it's okay. And the thing is that I've always quite been a bit fond of AppleScript. I think it's the only programming language I almost try to understand. Almost. But it has its intricacies, and developers hate it, but I don't know why. But because it's a scripting language, it's not really a developer language, maybe. Mm-hmm. And it's quite different. And it's true that sometimes people call me a developer and say, no, I'm a scripter, which is not exactly the same thing. But it's true. Each time I try to open Xcode, I feel, ooh, and I close it anyway, automatically. So the thing is, I was on holidays. It was in the summer. It was in July. And I got a few days to kill, and I said, it could be interesting to see if I could just try to find a way to select the OS X app and then put it directly on the DMG, and that's it. And a USB thumb drive. And let's try it if I can do it. And I tried it, and it worked. So I say, hey, cool. And I tried a few different things, and I tried to find if I could use Spotlight to find the installer by itself automatically, and try to make it a bit funnier to use and a bit easier. So, and it worked. I said, okay, I can try to put it on my website. And I put it on my website. I said, okay, you can download it and play with it, and but no support, because that's it, and it's free, and use it if you want, and that's it. And the funny thing is that some French Mac websites talk about it. And one day, it happened that one English site, and I think it was 9to5Mac at this time, heard about it and put a link and a small review on its website, and said, hey, you can download this, and it can help you to make... so it was Lion DiskMaker at this time. It was only for Lion, of course. And you can try it, and it could help to make your own thumb drive, install thumb drive. And the funny thing is that it was on my website, and I think I watched the counters on the website, and it went from something like 3,000 downloads a day to 90,000 downloads on one day.
Wow.
You know? And I say, there's something interesting here. And the thing is that basically I didn't understand why people were so interested, because making your drive was easy, in fact, to do. Open the disk utility, put the install ESD thing in it, but people want really something really easy to use. And the thing is that I never understood is that why Apple didn't do it by itself since the beginning. That's a good question.
In fact, they made it harder when they took away, or they stopped talking about the ability to do it in disk utility, and now having to do it via the command line.
Yeah.
And was your decision from the very beginning to give this software away? Did you ever regret that decision when you saw 90,000 downloads in one day?
So that's the first part of the story. The other part is really interesting as well. The thing is that I was sure that I could not put it on the App Store, because AppleScript is no way on the App Store. You have to create an Xcode application, and I don't want to do this because I don't know Objective-C. I don't have time for this, and blah, blah, blah. So I decided that, no, that's okay. People don't know it, play with it, and that's okay. And someday somebody said, hey, you could put just something like a PayPal link, so that people can also pay for something if they want to show their support. And boy, do they pay.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
It's incredible. That's really incredible, because I really think that the thing is that the people can pay, and they can pay whatever they want. You know, I said, okay, you can make a donation, you can give $1 or a few dollars or whatever. But some people can pay a lot more. I think the biggest donation was something like $100.
That's heartening to hear that there is still support in the Apple community for shareware. Because,
that's right. That's incredible. But it's not shareware, basically, it's freeware. So people also could say,
freeware,
I don't want to pay. I don't want to pay.
Donationware.
Yeah, donationware. So you can also decide not to pay, and I'm okay. I'm not going to go to your flat and say, hey, pay it. No, it's okay. If you like to. And one of the most touching mail I got was from someone who said, well, I don't have much money, but I really want to show your support, so I give you $1. $1, you know. And I think it's great. And it's really touching in some ways.
So now you have this product that really resonates with people, and now Apple puts out new versions of the Mac OS, and now you have to support it and do updates to it. So how did that go?
So that's the problem. That's the biggest issue. In fact, people pay because they want to support the software for the time being,
Right.
The thing is that how can I say this? Yeah, at the beginning I didn't plan for this at all. So yeah, I began to see more technical people getting in touch by mail to get support because of issues they got because I did not test some stuff properly or because my machine was too powered. Yeah, but because I got some bugs which are sometimes just incredible. One day, many people were telling me, well, I got a crash at this time and I got this message. I could not get why it happened. The thing is that when I want to test DiskMaker, I try to do it on the fastest drive I can get. Because each time you have to put 5 gigabytes on a thumb drive, it can take a lot of time. And the problem was that I used some subroutines which got I said, well, try to go from 1 to 10,000 on this routine. And on my Mac, it was going so fast. Yeah, no problem. But for many people, in fact, if your Mac was very slow or they got a slower USB drive, and sometimes USB drive are very, very, very slow. Don't get a cheap USB thumb drive. Get a good one, please. Well, they got a crash that I did not get. So that's very annoying to analyze and to understand why it crashed, and so it's a lot of time. In fact, yeah.
So how did you crack that one? When did you end up having to did you think of that as a potential vector, and you thought I'll try it on a slow USB drive, or did you analyze the?
Well, I tried on another drive and said, okay, on this drive it fails, on another one it does not fail, on another machine that did fail, yeah, indeed. So I tried to understand, and yeah, I found that finally. But it's a lot of trials and error, so it's a lot of time, of course.
That sounds like technology consulting in general.
Yeah, but I got some really interesting stories, and especially so. The thing is that this product is something that I think make things really easier for people. But I got one day a mail with a donation from a guy, and it was like in July and was on holidays, and I was waking up and I got my iPad in my hands and I was checking if people gave donations, and sometimes when people give really great donations, I send a mail to say, hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your donations. Very nice from you, blah blah. And I got a mail and so steve@was.org.
Nice.
Like,
wow.
What? The was?
The was. Wow.
The was.
So you think at this time, is it a joke? So I answer, yeah. Thank you for donation. Well, I'm just feeling so small, right now. And is it really you? And I got an answer a few minutes later saying, well, yeah, and I always pay for the products I like, I use, something like this, for a shower I use. So which I thought, okay, my day is made and my life is made. So
that's wonderful.
I can I got some of the donation. I think I got one from a guy from Final Pro Team or something like this, and it's funny,
Wow.
And even another one, and I have to talk about this one because it's like God. But the Apple script guy at Apple,
Sal.
Sal Sagoyan. In 2005, I met Sagoyan at Apple Expo in Paris, and I was like, oh, my God, it's God. And I say, Mr. Sagoyan, I'm so fan of your work, and I love Apple script, blah blah blah. And I was very happy. And a few years later, so I'm on the donation. I got a Sagoyan guy who gave a donation, said, is it really you? And said, yeah, great work. And yeah, this day you can die as well.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really great story. And so the thing is that DiskMaker, in fact, is a product I made for really for fun. At the start, just to see if I could do it. And that's really the beginning. And the thing is that I could do it, but also it could be helpful for people, which I did not, in fact, envision, because I thought, well, if you can do it with a command line, it can be okay. But for most people, in fact, command line is still intimidating, and they are afraid to do mistake. And And so now I got some kind of pressure because each time Apple just launched a new OS, since the first beta is available, I got some people sending me mails to say, hey, when is it available for OS X? Well, this time for the beta, I won't do anything until it's final because it's too much work.
That's probably a good idea.
Now that you got the developer version and the beta public version, which makes two different versions to support. No way.
Well, Guillaume, I can tell you from my experience that you're right in that a lot of people are kind of skittish about the command line. When I do my classes, we talk about the command to create install media, and I usually get a show of hands who uses Unix or who's touched it, and that usually is met with utter silence. And that's the chance that I use to talk about DiskMaker X, and then everyone, the slide before that, they don't take any notes, and then they go, oh, what's that link again? How can I find that app? And it really draws a lot of attention. So hopefully some of my previous students have been the ones that have donated to your cause.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is that basically it's normal because in fact Apple created the GUI, and that's just what Apple said for years. They said, well, the GUI is just the greatest thing ever, and so we shouldn't have to use command line like we did in the 1980s or later, or when you were using DOS or whatever. So everything should be done. You should be able to do a lot of things, in fact, in graphical interface, and that's not shocking. But the fact is that, these days, sometimes Apple decides that, no, we'll just give you a command line and deal with it. That's how they work.
Right.
Well, on behalf of all of us, Guillaume, the entire Mac community, you've given a lot back with this application. It's professionally done. You really put a lot of love and heart into it. So thank you on behalf of everybody.
Thanks a lot. It's really, really nice. Very nice. And the thing is that I love also because one of the facts I really took care with DiskMaker is about the icons. Have you noticed how nice the icons are? Really,
the artwork is beautiful throughout the app.
It's one of my friends, which is called Benjamin Renaud, who designed all the icons. In fact, I pay him to create the icons because I think it's a professional job and it has to be paid in a way. And so when you pay for DiskMaker, you also pay for the icon. In fact,
there you go.
Which is one of the nicest icons you can get, I think.
Well, it's worth it for the icon alone, and it has a lot of utility beyond. So I have to ask you, how much did Woz donate? No, I'm just kidding. That's private.
That's private. I wouldn't ever give it. Yeah.
That's really cool that you had a little exchange with him as well through email. That's just a really, really nice.
But that's what I've heard. That was already accessible, and that he answers mail, and that you can talk with him, and that's okay. He's a nice guy.
So as long as we're on the topic of some of the greats from the Mac community, you've had a chance to also work with David Pogue.
Oh yeah, it's a fun story as well. The thing is that I'm a David Pogue child, in fact, should I say? Because my first, not officially, but my first Macintosh book was Mac for Dummies, and it was written by David Pogue at this time. So it was in 1994, and I loved really how he wrote, and I tried to find inspiration in the way he writes because he has the kind of humor you can find if you go on my website as well. But he's really a great guy. I mean, when I heard his song spoof, I was laughing so much. Have you heard about this one? No.
Yeah, he did it at a Macworld once or something. He did a spoof he plays a keyboard, right, and he sings some kind of spoof. I forget what song it was and the details. On his
website, I think it's davidpogue.com. No, pogue.com, I think. You got some other songs like Don't Cry For Me, Cupertino, or stuff like this.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's the one. Yeah.
It's so great. And so it was really an inspiration for me and in my work. And one day I got an email from a French company called Erol, which is a French book company. And they got in touch with me to say, well, we've got a book from David Pogue, but we'd like you to translate. It was about iTunes, and it was iTunes and iPod at this time. about the iPod, not iPhone, because iPhone was not available yet. And they told me, well, we'd like a French translation of this book, so if you want to work on it, well, we'll be pleased. And I said, yeah, great, I would love to do it. So I wrote the translation. I took all the screen captures, including the self-made screen captures of the iPod, because, for the iPod, you couldn't take a screen capture by pressing buttons. So the thing is that I had to recreate all the screen captures in Photoshop.
Wow.
That was fun.
Man.
That's above and beyond.
It was a nightmare. And I talked with Spog a few years later and told me, well, for the book, they had to go to Apple, which has the specific version of the iPod, where they could have a software. They had a software where we could create screen captures, but they were not allowed to use the software outside of Apple anyway. So
Nice.
I took another way and recreated by myself. Yeah, it was a fun time. And so I got in touch with David Pogg and to ask him a few questions about the book and the translation. And we got in touch. And and later I wrote a book on OS 10. So it was called Léopard Efficace. So it was at 10.5. And it was a book which was really a lot for me, because I wanted to write a book on the Mac, but regarding integration of the Mac in enterprise. Not a specific Mac book for everybody, but a bit more for Mac admins, And it was a really nice project, and it was about 500 pages, something like this. And so I wrote the book, and I asked David Pogg, well, would you mind if you could write the forward for me? And he told me, well, I don't do it usually, but I can do it for you. So it was really nice because we got in touch, and so we met in Paris, and we had a very good time in Paris. And he's a lovely guy, and really I owe him so much. But yeah, that's a guy.
He is a lovely guy. I've never met him in person, but he's actually a neighbor of Sam and Joe. He lives not too far from you guys, right?
Yeah, lives like in the next town over or something like that, I think.
Actually,
very, very close. He lives in Connecticut.
Yeah, he used to operate a little bit of a consulting practice too back in the early days, and we ended up picking up some clients from him when he moved on to bigger and better things.
I got another fun story with him, because he asked me once, he had a daughter, and he wanted, in fact, they had this story in the US about Flat Stanley, I think, something like this.
Of course.
You know that? Yeah. So Flat Stanley, that is crushed by a bookshelf, I think, something like this, and it becomes so flat that it can be put in an envelope and then travel into the world. That's it.
Yes. Yeah, our kids read that book. Yes.
Flat
Stanley, yes.
So it's not a French. I don't think French kids read it. It's not something my kids have read, I think. And so what I've done, he sent me a mail and said me, well, would you mind if I send you my daughter's Flat Stanley, and you can just take a few pictures to wow everyone in a classroom? I said, yeah, why not? So I went to Paris and took pictures of Flat Stanley in front of the Eiffel Tower and of the opera and everything, and sent it back. And it was so happy, and the daughter was so happy. Yeah, it was.
That's great.
Yeah, that was fun. Flat Stanley.
So, are you opening up this to all our listeners? Anyone who has a
if you send you Flat Stanley, they want to travel in Paris.
I have a flat Jerry I'm going to send you, so Jerry can travel to Paris.
That was the story. But yeah, he was a really nice guy. We met in Paris, and I was very proud that he accepted to work on, to write forward for my books, and we met a lot. And that it's like the circle of life. You began by reading David Pogg's book, and then he writes you forward for your books. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. I could die pretty happy now.
Don't do it just yet. You got to make the latest version of DiskMaker X for Mac OS Sierra.
For Sierra, yeah.
At the end of the year, okay. But you have to show your support first. Send the money.
Of course.
That's awesome.
But really, if you, as I said, you can use DiskMaker for free, and it's okay for me. I think the donationware is one of the best things ever, really, because I like the idea that people just give money or their feelings according to their means as well. If people have a lot of money and can give them a lot of money, good. If they don't have a lot of money and don't want to spend on it, well, if you could help them anyway, good as well.
Well, it also is a great way to try out software. I was using SSD fan control for the longest time to deal with the issue where when you replace an iMac hard drive and you get the SMC, causing the fans to run full speed. This little free piece of software just solves that problem and did it very elegantly and consistently well. And we would use it, for a while there, we were using it as pretty much standard issue for those upgrades. And, after the, I don't know, fifth or 10th one or something, I thought, wow, this works really well. And this author is producing the software that I've come to rely on. And I sent him, $100 or something like that, thinking this is a small price to pay to enable us to do these upgrades. And, and without that, there are a number of options out there that are all for pay. And it's just a barrier that I wasn't willing to, to climb in that case. So to be able to, like you said, just put the software out there and then just to allow people to give you money that, that they feel is a value for it. And for it to work out that way and be successful for you, I think is a really great story. Unfortunately, it was not successful for Mike Bombic with Carbon Copy Cloner. They gave it away for the longest time and said that basically, they did not expect there to be very much support when they started selling it because of the amount of donations they had collected. They figured they could extrapolate from there, and it just wasn't. They didn't expect a lot, and it completely blew them away. Once you had to pay for it, they collected. They did very well with it. And so it's not every piece of software ends up collecting those donations to make it worthwhile. But it's great to hear that DiskMaker X has done well for you as well as it has.
But there is something which is interesting regarding the demographics of people who give money for software. And if I watch about the number of people globally who give money, I think the US really give a lot more. But I think it's more a tradition because in France we don't have really the culture of giving a tip. In restaurants or like things like this. In the US, the waiter is not paid. It has to be paid by his tip. And in France, the waiter is paid, and sometimes people can give a tip if they wish. And I think there is a cultural issue here, which means that basically, I think in France, I've got a lot of people using DiskMaker, according to the bug reports I've got, and people talking about it with me. But if I compare the amount of money, and I'm not trying to be cheap, here, and saying, "Hey, French people, give more money, please." But it's just that it's interesting to see that, in fact, the demographics are respected in a way. You know what I mean?
Yes, that is interesting. Yeah. And at the same time, if you think about it, the internet has come from a culture where people believed in the early days of the internet that everything was supposed to be open and free too at the same time and not really have to pay for. It was all shareware. So that is interesting though.
Yeah. Well, then again, in the Mac community in particular, there was a culture of shareware, where you'd pay, what you were able to, or you'd be able to distribute the software and then expect to pay for it at a certain time or whatever. So I think, and that's more, I don't know, I don't have a lot of experience in the PC world, but I think that was more of a Mac thing because we were a community that, talked amongst ourselves.
The thing is that the Mac software also is much more polished in many ways than in the PC world, I think. And I think that maybe the Mac developers are more dedicated. I can tell you that I've never been so happy than when I could finally pay for my license of DragThing. James Thompson was just doing such an amazing job on DragThing. And for those who don't know this software, it was how can I say this? Manchester of the dock, yeah?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really. And he worked on the dock, in fact, on West End's dock at the time.
Oh,
and,
really? He was hired by Apple based on his experience with DragThing?
Yeah, sure. You never read the DragThing's website?
No, I guess not. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting story because that's the other angle is if you do a really good job and put a really polished piece of software out there, maybe you get acquired. Maybe you fly home to the mothership at some point and live out your dreams there.
I don't know if there's still this James Thompson. So on dragthing.com, he published one page where I wrote a small appreciation on it when it was, I think, for 10 years of DragThing or something like this. And he talked about this story about when he tried to work with Apple. And I think if you listen to one podcast, which is Debug, If you listen to Debug, there were one story where with James Thompson where he talked about his history at Apple. It's very interesting.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Like, that, who was the guy who wrote Finder Pop? Remember Finder Pop?
I don't think I ever used it, Finder Pop. I remember hearing about it, though. What did that do?
Well, it was like getting advanced contextual menus in macOS. I think it was macOS 8, 9 at the time. And the guy, Totally O'Connor, wrote Finder Pop, worked for Apple on the contextual menus, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well,
yeah. Sometimes. There are bridges,
Sure. It's either that or you get Sherlocked. They just do it in-house, and then your product is... what was the precursor to Sherlock? It was
Watson.
Watson, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I get the feeling Guillaume is waiting for that call for DiskMaker X.
Well, the thing is that it will happen. So the day it will happen, I don't know if it will be happy or just say, okay, that's nice, Because basically the fact is that DiskMaker is based on Apple scripts, so you can't do a lot of advanced stuff with graphical interface. It's very straightforward, It's streamlined because it asks you questions about what you want to do, how you want to do it, and wait, and that's it. If I had the Cocoa expertise, I could do an app where you just drag the application and press a button and that's it, and this would be nicer. And probably someone will do it one day or another, and that's it. But this day, well, maybe DriveThing will suffer. DiskMaker 10 will suffer from it, and well, that's life. And maybe I will just be happy that somebody just finally just took the how can I say this?
Took the torch.
Yeah, that's exactly this. The torch. Yeah, and it's in 2 days, Mexico. Woohoo! and then just decide to move it with something which would maybe be a better utility, and that's life. And that's okay.
Well, and it was a good run, and and you had your interactions with Woz and Pogue and everything, and so it's really great, and it has been a great run. I mean, it's been now 5 versions of the Mac OS, right? Something like that, 4 or 5.
It's the Lion, so 5 version. But
very good. I had to count on one hand for me to figure that out.
But it goes so fast,
Yeah.
And in fact, the biggest issue I got was when macOS 10.9 arrived, Mavericks, which was a very good version of macOS 10. But we decided that you could not use the drag and drop or use this utility or this util command to build a drive. You had to use a specific command which is built in the application, create install media, it's called. And then I had to recreate everything, so to rebuild everything from macOS 10.9, but still keep compatibility with macOS 10.8. It was nightmarish.
So you had a second code path, I guess, really, for macOS 9.
2 different paths, and it's a nightmare to deal with.
10.9. Yeah, it gets more complicated as they go, and I'm curious what changes, and I haven't looked at any changes in macOS Sierra. I made the disk using the command line, but I guess we won't talk about NDA stuff, but
no, I just hope that the only work I've got to do is just to Command F replace macOS 10, 10.11 by macOS 10.12, and it works. But now that I've got also to change the OS 10 word, and now it's macOS again. I have to work.
You must know a little bit about the bless command. Do you know about the bless command and using it to badge the different partitions on a disk with the text labels and adding custom folders and stuff like that. I got into this trying to make my SciTool prettier, on a variety of machines. I found that if you partition the device, the USB drive, on one machine, I think there's something to do with like the firmware version of the machine or something like that, where sometimes it respects the graphical images of the different partitions, and sometimes you get the generic icons, and it's not clear to me. I haven't spent a ton of time on it, but it's a really kind of unique, probably stupid problem. But it would be nice to be able to insert it in any machine and have that pretty graphical logo show up on the boot.
But it raises one of the questions because about the format of the partition itself, the file partition format. Because you can have GPT on the Mac and so UID partitions, or you can have the old Apple format with PowerPC, or you can have MBR file format. And the problem is that most thumb drives now use MBR, and so when you customize the icon and everything on the drive, it does not appear when you press Alt at startup, which is a mess.
Right. Yeah, I was pretty sure that I was using GPT, GUID partition format, but it still wasn't consistent. Like with certain series of machines, it'll work, and on others, it's still, everything still boots properly and everything. It's just that it doesn't show the graphical icon for like I'll copy and paste, and I forget if DiskMaker 10 does this, but you can copy and paste, the icon from the installer app into the actual volume.
But a big problem I got because when I tried to make DiskMaker nice, I would say, when I try to make the things fancy at the end of the process, the thing is that at the beginning of the process, I have to take care about the partition format first, and then to reformat the drive. But the thing is that some people use a drive, they want to use a drive with multiple partitions. So I've got two options in DiskMaker. One which says exactly, if you have an 8 GB thumb drive, use this option, but beware, it will erase the whole drive with all partitions. And I took extra care to mention all the partitions which will get erased. And I got a few people who wrote me to say, I installed DiskMaker and your crappy software just erased my whole drive with all my software and all my stuff and all my pictures. But which option did you choose? Did you choose 8 GB thumb drive? And sorry. Just read the error message, and I put extra care to mention all the partitions. We got an error message, but people don't read error messages, so they don't read.
Nobody reads the error.
Awful. Yeah, nobody reads. You just go straight and instead of saying, "Okay, I may press cancel" and ask a question, it's like, right. Sorry.
I love those. You get those emails sometimes from clients where they say, I got this error and it was something about such and such. And I'm like, could you just tell me what it said? Like that would go a long way here, like I'm guessing like, were you doing this? No. Were you doing that? No. Then I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it said something, but I can't remember exactly what it said. But
Right.
Can you fix that?
It's like you have to ask, like, is your computer working? Yeah. Okay. Like then we're done here because I don't.
It's. It can be quite painful also because all people have different configurations and you don't know exactly how they use the software, and they got sometimes localization. Localization was quite an issue because I wanted the software to be available in French and English. So at the beginning I tried to use I got the first version of DiskMaker, I got a French version, English version, and then I tried to look in AppleScript if I could have a translation directly in AppleScript, and you can do it. You can have localized scripts, but it's quite a mess to deal with. At the time, I think I got something like 7 or 10 languages in DiskMaker 10. People just sent mail to say, "Hey, I want to translate." Well, why not? But it's a bit difficult because I have then to manage translation, and I'm not a GitHub guy, or I just do things the old style, and sometimes it's quite difficult.
Aren't the paths different? Even just like the paths to the applications folder and the user library and stuff.
The name of the application is different because it's localized.
Right.
So
that's true.
Yeah, for me, if I look at my OS 10 installer, it's called Installer OS 10 El Capitan. And I can't tell you in Japanese because it's a bit difficult for me. But that's the kind of issues you can get. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes also because people, the infamous bug about when on the Mac, if a volume is mounted too hastily, it comes back and there's got this untitled folder at the root of the volumes folder. And then you've got, my drive doesn't work because I got untitled and it doesn't work. Yeah, it's called Untitled 1 now, False mounts. Yeah.
False mounts, yes. They go Watchman. Watchman is identifying those now.
Watchman.
Yeah. Wow, a lot of little details. I give you a lot of credit for taking that leap of faith to say I'm going to write software that inherently needs to erase a drive as step one. That's
But a dangerous step, and I try to find, the worst thing is that I try to find many and many ways how we could fail. And of course you can try you just try. Then sometimes you get a mail saying, yeah, you erased it. Say, oh, no way. Yeah, we've got a backup, of course. Yeah, try a disk recovery utility and see what happens. But I can't do anything for people who don't read the messages. That's the problem.
That's true. All bets are off in that case.
Use Time Machine. Thank you. My.
Guillaume, thank you so much for joining us on Command Control Power. It's been a great conversation, and I think you are officially our first guest from France. Is that right, guys? Do you remember?
I believe that's true.
Yeah.
It's just great to
correct,
talk.
sir.
Yeah, it's great to talk shop across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for doing it this hour. I know it's late in the evening there.
It's not almost 1 a.m., so it's okay.
Wow, not so
early.
bad.
It's almost early.
That's right. It's early, not late.
Yeah, because people just forget when you're consulting all the day long. Well, sometimes you have stuff to do after 22.
That's true.
10 p.m.
That's true. That's true.
But I think that's the most difficult part of our job, because you are working all day long, and then at the end of the day, you got all the stuff you didn't have time to deal with, and people just forget that sometimes. Well, we don't have any Saturday or Sunday sometimes as well.
That's true.
That's very, very true.
Which is awful. Yeah.
Except if you're Joe. Joe clocks out on a Friday most weekends, and Sam and I are working, but Joe
4:30 and during the summertime.
Summer hours, yeah. No, I'm oftentimes in the office on a Saturday and Sunday. I'm right there with you guys in the trenches. You just don't know it.
I'll be looking for you.
You still doing Hawaiian shirt day at your office on Fridays, Joe? That's like the cool thing, right?
We're doing that all year, man. All year. Hawaiian shirt day.
But I remember when I promised my wife when I launched a company that, don't worry, I will be able to work only 4 days a week, and 1 day can be off, and it will be great. And yeah.
That's the biggest misconception about working for yourself. Is, you have to work harder, not easier. That's the biggest misconception.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and for me, I try to see, and I think that's the most difficult part for people who are working by themselves, is which is the point where you want to try to get somebody else to work with you, or to do something else, or I don't know. The thing is that I don't want to be a two guys company. And my difficulty is that, my company is named by my name, and people know my name. And the thing is that if I just sell something which has my name, but somebody else come to the customer, it can be difficult to sell.
No, you could hire somebody and just make it write it into the contract. They have to change their name.
No,
they have to take your last name.
Or
you could adopt, Guillaume.
You could adopt, yeah.
Yeah, I could hire my son. He's old enough.
That's true. It has to be a family company, one way or the other.
Yeah.
I like Jerry's idea. You can adopt an adult consultant, and he has to take off. That's great.
John Syracuse was talking about free-to-play dogs, and could have free-to-play consultants.
That's right. Take it for a spin. Well, it's you mentioned sometimes you wait until these things have to wait, right? You're busy, you're in the trenches all day, you're working hard, and things have to wait until you free up. And I was thinking, like, some days I eat lunch and then dinner in rapid succession at about 9 p.m. And it's you sometimes go so your nose is to the grindstone all day, and you just can't take a break. And there's other days I can go for a walk around the block, so I have to put that in perspective.
Yeah, but one day I remember I got a day which was so nightmarish. I went at the end of the day. I looked at my phone. I think I got something like 22 calls in the whole day.
Wow.
And say, how can I work on something else? I got so many support calls, and not sometimes easy stuff. Some very complicated stuff with people, and you just hang out. You got 2 calls simultaneously, and oh my god, and you just want to crash everything at the end of the day. Yeah, nightmarish.
Yeah.
We don't have such an easy job,
Definitely not.
No. Yeah.
Well,
but we've got passion. It helps.
It's true. I mean, you've clearly been a Mac guy your whole life, and you've had passion for it, and it's great to do this for a living and to be able to talk with some of the heroes of the industry, like Woz and so on. And maybe we'll get Pogue on the show one day. That'd be a great guest.
That would be great for sure.
Well, we know listeners can find you at Gète.net. That's Gete.net.
Yeah.
Consulting.
So just to mention, it's important because one of the first time at the beginning I was working with Apple Care. One of the Apple guys told me, Guillaume Gète. Guillaume in French, in English, it's William. William Gète remembers me something, William Gète, don't like this guy. Nightmarish.
Well, make sure, listeners, make sure you get it right. It's gete.net.
Yeah.
And
it's mostly in French, so if you don't, so pardon my French, definitely.
as the saying goes. Well done, and thanks again for joining us.
It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his